Regina Ress, thank you so much for joining us today. It is Monday, the 3rd of October, and 2022, and this is a monthly session of the Storytelling by and for Adult series. Thank you. You're joining us from New Mexico, I believe. Is that correct?
I am in at the foot of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, which are basically the southern bottom of the Rocky Mountains. I'm at 7,000 feet. I don't know what that is in meters.
Great. And
good to be here.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Yeah, if you told your resume, we'd be here for a couple hours because you are so accomplished. But please tell us a little bit about your work, and please introduce yourself fully and properly, and please tell us a story.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you. It's good to see so many friendly faces out there. Some of you I've met in Chennai. I'm Regina. My whole life has been basically performing, starting when I was a kid, actually, and segued from acting for theater, live theater, to storytelling when I met a wonderful storyteller named Diane Wolkstein, and she pulled me in. And I've told stories all manner of places, including in Chennai and others. But as I say, everything from the White House to maximum security prisons, which was some of the most amazing work I ever did for and with women who were incarcerated. So storytelling is an extraordinary way to speak beauty into the world. My story for today is an old one. It's got many versions, and we were just talking about all these various versions of stories. This has versions. It's basically, they say, from an old Scottish ballad, but probably earlier than that. This is a short form, a very short version of the story of Tamlane. In Scotland, a long time ago, in the Shire of Selkirk, at the confluence of the Ettrick and Yarrow rivers, in this very green place in a long time ago, there were the lands of the Earl of Murray and the lands of Dunbar, Earl of March. Now, the Earl of March had a daughter. She was beautiful to look at, and she was strong of spirit. She was called Burd Janet. And Lord Murray had a son. He was handsome, of course, and also highly spirited, and he was called Tamlane. Now, some of the stories say these two grew up knowing each other and loving each other from childhood. Other stories about them say they didn't really meet until the fairies, the elfin people, snatched Tamlane to be one of their own, to be the knight of the fairy queen. Well, one October day, when the old year was drawing to a close, against all warnings that she'd heard from when she was a wee bairn, the Earl's daughter, Janet, the Earl's daughter, left the sheltered known world of her parents' house. She mounted her horse. She rode to the woods that formed the borderland of her father's estate. Now, also against all warnings about not going to a particular spot in the woods, Carter Hall Wood to be naming the place, our spirited, willful Janet, she went against all warnings. It was quite well known that there was an elfin man living in Carter Hall Wood, and that young women in particular should stay away, as he exacted a toll when strangers ventured into the woods. But our Janet, as I have said, was a spirited lass. And it came a time she wanted to see just for herself who or what was hanging out down there in the borderlands. And so she hitched up her skirts, she braided her yellow hair, crowned her head, and went on down there as fast as she could go. Now, when she came to Carter Hall Woods, Tamlane's horse was there. There was a horse, a beautiful horse, by the well Storytellers, we know, if you know anything about old stories, you got to watch out for wells. But the elfin man was not to be seen. No one. She did see a beautiful double rose, and without thinking about it, she reached out, she plucked that wild rose. It's known that to pick a wild flower is, in a certain sense, to invite a disturbance against the natural order of things, to tempt fate, as it were. Taking something without permission, that invites a demand for payment. So heedless of the warning, she'd gone down to the green wood looking for him, and against common courtesy, common tradition, she tempted fate and plucked the wild rose. And you know what happened? Suddenly, there he was, this elfin man, asking her, well, who she was and what she thought she was doing there. Most versions of this story say he did exact payment, that he took her, implying against her will. Some versions report, let's just say, she was equally and happily involved with whatever did or did not happen down there by the well in the woods. And when she got back to her father's castle, many noticed a change in her. Well, some weeks later, the cook was her confidant. The cook took her aside and said, tonight is All Hallows. And some say the fairies come to call on All Hallows. Here's a bannock cake for you, baked special for the Samhain feast tomorrow. Half for you, half for him, if you find him. Well, Janet took the flat oak cake with its honey and its sweet herbs. She went straightway down to Carter Hall Wood, looking for the well, looking for another rose to pluck, looking for another rose to pluck. And she did. She just took a rose, and there he was. He stood there in his boots. He was so handsome, was Tamlane. He was holding the bridle of his big, beautiful white horse. And she was standing there looking at him, holding out that cake. She was pregnant, and she was not afraid. So there was Janet, and there was Tamlane. I brought you a bannock cake for tomorrow's All Hallows. And she held the honeyed cake to him. Oh, I cannot. Food from the castle is not for me to eat, he said. It's even if it's baked special for the Samhain feast. No, I cannot. Oh, would you come home with me? She said. Nay, I cannot. I am a knight of the fairy queen. I am not my own man, Janet. He took her hand, he sat her down on a mossy rock, and he told her what had happened. One day he'd been riding his horse across a field. He came to a little hillock. He rode widdershins around it, that is, counterclockwise, against the natural path of the sun. And as soon as he did that, he was overcome with sleepiness, drowsiness. He got off the horse, he lay down, he went to sleep. I don't know how long I slept, he said, and when I woke, I was not in the field, I was not on the hill, I was not in any land. I knew it was a bright place, Janet, a land of light, without a sun or a moon. There was no night. A land, Janet, of pure celestial beam. It was a bright land, Janet, a dream. I would stay there happily, he said. I would stay there, say, for the memory of you, Janet. There's no sickness there. There's no death there. We sleep in the bud of the rose. I would stay there, say, for you, Janet. I would, but what? What? She said. There's a grave danger for me down there. I fear every 7 years the fairies must pay tithe to the nether world. I know the queen loves me. I know the queen loves me well. I fear, though, I'm to be the sacrifice this year. Oh, Tamlane, she said. Tamlane, Tell me, how can I save you? I'll save you. Oh, no. Well, if you would win me out of Elfland, there's something you can do, but it's fearsome, Janet. I wouldn't ask you to do it. Tell me, she said. I would do it no matter what. I'm brave. I'm strong. I'm not afraid. On the night of All Hallows, between the hours of 12 and 1, you come to the well at Miles Cross, and with you bring holy water from the church and make you a compass around the well and around yourself of the holy water, he said. Tonight is All Hallows. Will you be with them? She said. How shall I know you? She said. The first court of fairies let him pass. The second court of fairies let him pass. But at the head of that third court of fairies, with the fairy queen, I will be there on my white horse. You'll see me. There will be signals. You will see I have a star in my cap. My right hand will be gloved. My left hand will be bare. That will be the token. You will know me by that. But how can I rescue you? She said. How? When I pass, stop the horse. I'll get off. You pull me down and you hold on to me, Janet. You seize me and hold me fast. The fairies will try to change me into many hateful things. They will, with their magic, change me into many things. Hold tight to me, Janet. Hold me through all the changes. It will be me. I will not hurt you. Hold me through all the changes, Janet. When they change me into a poker, a red-hot iron poker, you throw me in the well. And that will end their hold on me, Janet, and you will win me back to life. I'll do it, she said, and she rode home. Well, that night, that very night, near to midnight, she went to the church. She got a little flask of holy water, and she went, wrapping herself in her green mantle. Down she went to the well at Miles Cross, and she put the holy water around the well and herself, staying in that circle of protection. She waited. She waited. Chinga, 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 chinga. She heard the bells of the fairies. There were bells on the reins of the fairies. Chinga, chinga, chinga. She held her breath, and there was a procession of elven folk. 1, 2, and then the third one came, and there was the fairy queen, and next to her on a white steed was her Tamlane, the star in his cap, his right hand gloved, his left hand bare. And when that horse came near her, she rushed out to grab the reins. He slid off the horse. She grabbed hold of him, and she held on to him. Tamlane is away, they cried. Tamlane is away, cried those elven folk. And they crowded around and changed him into many things. First, they changed him into an adder, into a snake, trying to get out of her arms. She held on to him. Then they changed him into a roaring fire. She held on to the fire. Then a block of ice he was, a block of ice. She held on. Then it was a bear in her arms. Then it was an eagle in her arms, trying to get away from her. She held on. And then in her arms, it was a red hot iron, a poker. And she threw it into the well. And out of the well stepped a bare naked man. She took off her cloak, wrapped him in it. Tamlane is away! And the queen of Elfland was furious. Had I known, Tamlane, a lady would borrow thee, I would have plucked thine eyes out and put in eyes of wood. Had I known a lady would borrow thee, I would have pulled thy beating heart from thy heart, from thy chest, and put in a block of rock. And they rode away. They rode away. And Janet and Tamlane were standing there. They got on their horses and they rode home. And they got married. Oh, they did get married. And a fine house was built for them, and all around the house, do you know what grew in great profusion? What flowers? Wild roses, of course. Tamlane. I guess I'm not quite awake. I stumbled over a few words. Please forgive me. I've told a much longer version of it, and I've told it with some interspersing of things like, who's the elfin man or woman in your life? And what are the green woods in the borderlands you might have gone to? Things like that.
And what are all the transformations that the person goes through? Some of them a little dangerous and unpleasant, but one has to hold on anyway.
Indeed. And that, of course, is what I love in the story. And I had a man who saw one of the shows I did with it say, thank you, I'm holding my lover through his changes as he's dying right now. And another time I told that story in a jail, the first time I was in a jail with women. The person who brought me in, I said, well, I'm going to tell this story about this woman who saves her beloved from the fairy. She said, oh, you can't tell the fairy story. This is the women in this jail. They're very tough. These tough women have been through a lot. 75% of women in jail have been abused. Let's just start right there. And a lot of them are in jail because of their boyfriends, drugs, and things like that. So there they are. They're sitting in the jail. And I thought about it, And so what I did was I frame it. I think framing a story is, if you're not sure how it's going to be received. I said, ladies, I'm going to tell an old Celtic story. I'm going to have to use the F word, fairies. And everybody laughed. They laughed. And I thought, okay, I'm home free. And I said, what are fairies like? And they started with Disney. Oh, they're cute. They're beautiful. And one of them, said, Tinkerbell. That's what I think of. And I said, what's Tinkerbell like? And one of them said, excuse me, folks. One of them said, she's a bitch. I said, let's talk about fairies. They steal human babies. I said, ladies, do you know anything that's really beautiful, that seems to be very beautiful and very seductive, that will turn around and kill you? And they did. Because why were they sitting in jail? And it was remarkable because the discussion afterwards, and one of them said, because we were talking about holding the people we love through their changes. And one of them said, we have to hold ourselves through our own changes. We change too, and we have to hold ourselves through our changes. That was so beautiful. Mm-hmm. They were very wise women, these women sitting in that jail.
Yes, so it turns out that fairies in England and Scotland and Ireland are not just little Tinkerbells. They're in the real folklore. They're rather tough and mean.
And mean.
Yeah.
And
who
can
knew?
Turn around and kill you.
Yeah. That's not what we thought fairies were.
No. Well, Disney, the Disney.
Mm-hmm.
Any questions, comments?
Hello, Regina. Always a pleasure listening to you. So engrossing. And I think especially while you were giving instructions, rather Tamlane was giving instructions, hold on, I could physically feel it. I felt I need to hold on. It felt like that instruction was specifically for me. And I could already imagine, oh my God, what is she going to do? What is he going to be turned into by the fairies? And it was a little scary and it was a little fun. So I really love the story. Thank you so much for sharing that one.
Thank you.
Maura.
Yeah. Thank you, Regina. And it's we've talked about that before. You know, admire so much that personal storytelling. And so you said, well, traditional stories are personal stories. And you mentioned all that about the trolls and the crocodiles, dials. And I thought before, yeah, sure, she's right. I totally agree. But this is the first time that I really experienced it, you know. I would swear in front of any court of law that you really saw these fairies, that you know you made it happen in front of our very eyes. So if a story is true and real, it's that story, may it be about fairies or no matter what. And that's really a great art. So thank you for that.
Good to see you again, and we'll see you. She keeps popping up. I said, I see you in the most interesting places. Of course, it's always on a screen, but we keep showing up in some, you know, so today we're in India.
Gustav? Oh, you're on mute. You've got to turn your mic on.
Are experiencing telling in a prison where there is young girls that have children, and it's very difficult to tell this young, very young 15 16 year olds, and we sing with them lullabies for the children, but sometimes they want stories also. And I really cherish that story or similar stories to tell, because the thing that is it's life can be different. You can change, you can go out. So thank you. It's a beautiful story. Maybe I won't tell that story, but I'll search stories that have that feeling that can be magic, that magic exists, that you can do something. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Regina. Wonderful.
Good to be with you all.